Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to take a look at the various timelines for the many Punisher iterations, and in particular trying to figure out which ones are now canon to the new Deadpool and Wolverine movie. But right off the bat, huge thank you to Robbie. Dude, couldn't have done this video without you. Your research was so helpful. Now, there will be some spoilers for these movies because it's impossible to talk about the timelines without bringing up at least some of the plot points, but I promise to keep the spoilers to a minimum. So without further ado, let's dive right in and see what we can find out. Don't forget, there's an August contest running all month long. Be a subscriber, leave a comment. You could win a book or a steelbook. Best of luck. And we have a membership option with lots of cool perks, so you might check it out in case you're interested. So even before the movie came out, I did some timeline videos on characters I thought might cameo in Deadpool and Wolverine. In particular, I did timelines for Daredevil and Elektra, Fantastic Four, Thomas Jane's Punisher, Blade, and I even did Eric Bana's Hulk and Nick Cage's Ghost Rider. Obviously, the last two were not even referenced at all, but I'm hoping they may show up in Secret Wars. So if you're interested in the timelines for any of these characters, you can check those out. And speaking of the Punisher, I've done videos on Jon Bernthal's Punisher, who of course is now returning in Daredevil Born Again. That's going to be awesome. But there's videos on his flashbacks, unanswered questions, as well as a season-by-season placement of all the Netflix shows in the MCU timeline. But so why did I do a video on particularly Thomas Jane's Punisher? Well, in the trailers, we saw the Russian. Looks like he was going to show up, and sure enough, there he is on the right in the movie. Now, it's not the same Russian that we saw in the Punisher movie, Thomas Jane's movie, but I believe that's because all of the lesser villains are variants and therefore a little bit different. You can see it in several of the other characters as well. In this case, his hair's darker and he's got a beard. But otherwise, that's the Russian. So for sure, they're making Thomas Jane's Punisher canon to the Deadpool and Wolverine movie, to the multiverse in general. But boy, did we get even more than that. Obviously, we got Blade. That was awesome. But look at what Blade's holding. Giant rocket launcher, right? And then remember in the movie, Deadpool says, "Where'd you get that little beauty?" Of course, he's saying that to Elektra, so her stuff is now canon. And she says, "That's the Punisher's AT-4. And Deadpool jokes and says, "Well, which Punisher? There's been like 5 of them." So that's really interesting he said that. Now, he said like 5 of them. So maybe he was rounding up to be funny, or maybe he really did mean 5. So the very fact that he said 5, I believe that immediately canonizes to the overall multiverse all of these. Dolph Lundgren's, we're going to talk about his in this video. Thomas Jane, we already covered him in a previous video. Ray Stevenson, man, R.I.P., buddy. We're going to cover his timeline in this video. And then Jon Bernthal's obviously part of the main MCU, and I covered his in an earlier video. So, okay, that's 4 of the 5. Who's the 5th? Again, assuming Deadpool wasn't rounding up to be silly, who is number 5? Well, maybe it's the Punisher from Avengers Confidential, Black Widow, and Punisher. I mean, this did come out on DVD and Blu-ray, so it is a movie, but I don't know, it's not live action, so maybe it's not. Let me know your thoughts. Is this number 5? Or it could be the Punisher from the animated series Spider-Man. I loved Spider-Man, the animated series. I've done videos on its timeline, by the way. Again, this isn't live action, but he didn't say it had to be live action, so maybe it's this Punisher. Or maybe it's even a wink and a nod to the fact that Thomas Jane's stunt double showed up in Spider-Man 2, just kind of snuck onto the set for this one shot, and therefore many people have said this canonizes Thomas Jane's Punisher to the Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, because he showed up in Spider-Man 2. Now, keep in mind that's not Thomas Jane; it's his stunt double, but still. That is interesting. That is it. Maybe that's the 5th one. Maybe it's just an inside joke. So, okay, I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. Did he really mean 5, and is there a 5th that I'm not thinking of here? But I do believe all the rest of them are now canon. So, we're going to look at the timelines for all of these. Well, at least 2 of them, because again, I did already cover Thomas Jane's Punisher. You can check that out in the other video. These are when his movies take place within his universe's timeline. So now we're going to look at Dolph Lundgren, from way back in 1989, his movie, and Punisher's Warzone from 2008. All right, so we'll start with Dolph Lundgren's movie, and you know it's going to be good, right? Because Stan Lee was involved, executive consultant in particular. And this is way back in 1989 when they were making movies. That's crazy. So we do get a bit of a timeline right off the bat because this news reporter is saying after 5 years of appeals, Dino Moretti is released. So why does that matter? Well, because he was acquitted of the murder of the Castle family. So that little picture up there, that doesn't look like Dolph Lundgren. I don't know who they got for the picture, but that doesn't look like him. But anyway, we also see his daughters. And mind you, his daughters, that's interesting for anybody that knows the canon. He's got a son and a daughter, so I don't know what's going on there. But nonetheless, here they are. In fact, there's his family while they were still alive, heading to a car, and that car blows up. Now, I believe the reason the Punisher's not dead is because he's driving the car that we're seeing here. He's watching it happen. So he should have been in the other car. He just didn't get home in time. But yeah, so Dino was acquitted of that murder. And since those 5 years, 125 gangland murders have been attributed to the Punisher. Wow, that's like 25 a year. Nicely done, buddy. So very cool. He's a reign of terror. And so now here's Dino getting out of prison. And most importantly, he is the head of the Franco crime family. We're going to see Franco come up some more. But good old Dino doesn't last too long because the Punisher comes after him. You can kind of see the dude over on the left there. He's not doing too well. And Dino doesn't get a shot off. Let's put it that way. So, okay, Dino's out of the picture. So what happens now? Well, it's the 80s, right? You got to have Louis Gossett Jr. I love him. He's playing Detective Jake Berkowitz. You can see behind him there who is the Punisher. So he's been trying to track down the Punisher, but we do find out eventually that he is an old ally and partner of the Punisher. So it's really interesting dynamic with his character. We also see, I know I'm going to butcher his name, so I'm not even going to try, but this famous actor playing Gianni Franco himself. Now, where do you recognize this guy from? Well, he was from The Fugitive. He was kind of a jerk in The Fugitive. And, he was also kind of a jerk in the James Bond movie Living Daylights. So he plays a really good jerk. And he's a jerk in this movie too, but he's great. Does a really good job. But yeah, he is the head of the Franco family. And of course, Dolph Lundgren is the Punisher. Man, he looks really mean. I would not want to mess with that dude. But one problem, a lot of fans complain because no skull on the chest. What on earth? But this is kind of in that era where comic book movies didn't want to look like the comic books. So they did not want to put the skull on him because it was too comic booky. Oof. We did at least get the skull on the knives that he killed people with, but that doesn't count. That does not count. And then this dude, his name is Shake, and they never refer to him as anything else. But a lot of people have said, nah, that's Micro. I mean, it doesn't look like Micro from the comics, but he helps him the whole time through. He's kind of like his informant, getting information, etc. So yeah, we're going to call him Micro, but officially he's Shake. So the Punisher's base is in the sewers in this movie, which is pretty cool. But really strangely, he likes to medicate in his birthday suit. Legit, yeah, like buck naked. So, okay then. I mean, if that's what you want out of a movie, Dolph Lundgren meditating in the nude, then this is your movie. No, it was really strange. But again, he's tortured. He's been through a lot, and this is just how he decompresses, I guess. But also in the sewer, I love this part. He rides his motorcycle through the tunnels multiple times throughout the movie, and I've always thought that was cool looking in each scene where it was happening. Okay, so a little bit of a timeline thing here. Franco is saying a week from now, we're going to get 600 kilos of drugs coming in at a dock. So we know at least the movie takes a week because of that statement. Because then we go forward to the dock when the Yakuza show up. Yep, the Japanese Yakuza. And it creates a rivalry now between Franco's men, basically, and the Yakuza. And in fact, the Yakuza is led by the ruthless Lady Tanaka, and then that's her daughter with her. And boy, she is ruthless. Trust me, this movie is pretty, she's savage. She's savage. All right, so when she's not able to convince the Franco family to work with her, she's like, fine then, I'll just kidnap all your kids. She takes all the kids from the gang and holds them for ransom. Now, Punisher manages to get all of them free except for one. Whose son? That would be Franco's son, of course. So Franco actually ends up teaming up with the Punisher to rescue his son. And that's Lady Tanaka there with her makeup on, but she looked really cool. And so basically Franco and the Punisher are now teaming up. And sure enough, a Punisher, no surprise, takes everybody out. By the way, it's a really cool fight scene. The final 10, 20 minutes of the movie is really, really good. But as you can see, the Punisher is just wiped out. But Franco's so happy to be back with his son, and then he tells his son, head out of the room, son. And as soon as his son's out of the room, now he decides to finish off the Punisher. Oh my goodness, what a jerk, right? I told you the guy's a jerk right up front. So no surprise, Punisher takes this dude out. But I love this. This was so cool. So Punisher looks down at little Tommy, says, you're a good boy, Tommy. Grow up to be a good man. And you're like, oh, that's actually kind of sweet. But then he says, because if not, I'll be waiting. And yeah, little Tommy poops his pants at this point. I mean, anybody would poop their pants. Oh my gosh, that is so awesome. What a great way to end the movie. Love it, love it, love it. But did we get any timeline? Yes, we did. Oh my goodness, check that out. They pull up a computer from the late 80s, right? And sure enough, there's a date. And this is even on the screen for a couple seconds. So this is not an accident. I really do think this is meant to be the time of the movie, which would obviously be August of 1988, mid-August. And remember, it started a week earlier, and it goes a couple of days after that. So it's throughout most of August, but starting early to late August. Also, it's in New York, obviously Punisher, and look at the trees. They're nice and green. Here's some more of the trees. So yeah, that works really good with a mid-August time frame. So, okay, great. This one wasn't too bad. That means Dolph Lundgren's Punisher is in August of 1988. And as I said, we already covered Thomas Jane's in a separate video, March to September 2003. And by the way, I don't want you to think I'm saying these are all connected to each other. They're not. And in fact, we're going to talk about why coming up next. Warzone by many was thought to be a sequel to Thomas Jane's Punisher. So let's see if it is. Well, one interesting thing about Punisher Warzone is it's part of something called Marvel Knights. There was a branding Marvel did with several movies. Well, I shouldn't say several. How about 2 movies? That would be Punisher Warzone and Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. So neither of them show up in each other's movies, but you can kind of guess that had this continued on, there would have been several characters, maybe Blade, all crossing over together. Oh my goodness, can you imagine? Would have been an early Midnight Suns. So hopefully the MCU will finally give us Midnight Suns, but maybe we were on our way to getting it back in the early 2000s there. All right, so is this movie, Punisher Warzone, a sequel or a reboot? Well, I'll tell you why I think it is most definitely a reboot. Because they show us that Ray Stevenson's version of the Punisher, his family was killed in 2002. And by the way, I love the fact that this movie in particular is so comic accurate. Notice his wife is Maria, and he has 2 kids, Lisa and Frank Jr. By the way, John Berthal's version of the Punisher in the Netflix shows, same thing, Maria, Lisa, and Frank. But here's the key, 2002, right? Well, in Thomas Jane's movie, and I covered this in the other video, notice they died in 2003. Okay, so you could just go, oh, maybe they forgot. It was an accident. No, it's worse than that. There's only 3 gravestones. And notice the one ends in AM. Well, that's because it's William. He only has 1 kid in the Thomas Jane movie, and his name isn't even Frank Jr., it's William. So, I don't know. I mean, I guess if people want to say they're connected and that this is a sequel, you can. Obviously, anybody can think whatever they want. But I really think that this says no. It is totally a reboot. You can't mess it up that badly unless you're not trying to tie the movies together. Also, it is worth noting again, Dolph Lundgren, his was even worse from a comic accuracy. Remember, he had the 2 kids, whose, by the way, I didn't say their names before. It's Annie and Felice, and his wife was Julie, not even Maria. So the Dolph Lundgren version didn't even try. But at least the Ray Stevenson was very, very comic accurate. And now we get the skull, right? Thank goodness. We didn't get it in Lundgren's, but now we get it in Stevenson's, and boy, does he look cool. I'm not a huge fan of the neck piece. I do realize that was in the comics for a while, but it's okay. I got used to it, but I don't prefer it. Let me know your thoughts. You like the neck piece or not? All right, so this Punisher, this version of the Punisher is very skilled and very brutal. I love in this opening scene where he's swinging on a chandelier, machine gunning everyone around him. But trust me, the violence is, I would actually say, more brutal than Netflix. Now, the fights are more brutal in Netflix. They go longer and they're more brutal. But my word, does he just waste some people in this movie. I mean, you want blood, this is your movie. Anyway, so one of the key plot points is he accidentally kills an undercover FBI agent because he didn't know he was an FBI agent. He thought he was a bad guy. So this is a funeral that he goes to just kind of watch from afar. And sure enough, that's the widow I'm sorry for your loss, says one of the gentlemen there. And so now Frank has basically made her a widow and made her daughter no longer have a father. So this eats him up the whole movie, and it's a very interesting dilemma to address. I'm sure it's been addressed in the comics multiple times, but in the movies, to make it the theme is really cool. How does he deal with the fact that he killed an innocent man? So, because it was an FBI agent that was killed, we meet Paul Budiansky, who is an FBI agent and is after Castle. And in particular, this is someone that was in the comics, same name, but very different. He was a New York cop, not FBI. So they brought the name from the comics, but didn't really translate the character. But I'll give him credit for using the name. And then notice, he says, 4 years, this Punisher's been wreaking havoc. Okay, remember, the gravestone was 2002, and now we know the Punisher's been out there for 4 years. All right, so maybe we're talking 2006. Let's keep that in mind. But Budiansky then meets up with Martin Soap. So Soap is the head of the Punisher Task Force, and he is also a character from the comics, same name, and in the comics, that character, Soap, is part of the Punisher Task Force, so that works. But notice what he says. He says, I've shadowed his every step for the last 5 years. So I guess if I have to choose between Soap or Budiansky on who I'm going to trust, I'm going to go with Soap, because Soap has been following him, this whole time religiously. And so 5 years probably makes more sense. Plus, later, Soap says to him, I've been trying this one strategy and it's never worked for me in 5 years. So twice he says 5 years. So we're going to go with the 4 years was an oops. So now that pushes into 2007 potentially. 2002, his family was killed and he's been Punisher for 5 years. Then they give us the final big timeline hint when he says 6 years ago, Frank Castle was a Special Forces instructor. Okay, interesting. So we're going back 6 years, and there he is. And a simple family man. Oh, look how cute he looks there. So happy. And obviously then his family gets killed. In fact, then he says, one day he takes his wife and kids for a picnic, and of course, you know the rest. So what it seems like they're saying is that 6 years ago the family was killed, 2002, that it took maybe a year for him to get going, and then he's been at it for 5 years, or at least they've been aware of him at it for 5 years. So, okay. Then that would basically say we're in 2008. All right, that works, because the movie came out in 2008. I always like it when they're in the same year. It makes the most sense. And definitely the setting is late October. You saw earlier when they were in the cemetery, you saw leaves, but look at this. The leaves are already fallen. They don't fall until late October. So yeah, we're definitely October of 2008. So okay, very cool. We got the timeline down, but I want to talk about a couple more cool comic references in the movie. Micro is in the movie. Yes. Just like the John Bernthal's character having a micro, we get a micro. And even better, it's Wayne Knight. Now, when you see Wayne Knight, normally you think of either one of two things. Newman. I love that. Or you think, He's the best. Wayne Knight is the best. He's had so many awesome roles. But yeah, he's really good as Micro. In fact, they even use his name from the comics, Linus Lieberman. So everything fits perfectly and call him Microchip there. So that's awesome. Also, Micro has an assistant worker with him, Carlos Cruz, who is a character in the comics. In the comics, he became a helper to Micro when basically Micro and the Punisher kind of had a little falling out. So this dude's nothing like in the comics, but again, I'll give him credit for using a name from the comics and, having basically the same character story. And then we get an interesting little bit of a change, Billy Russotti instead of Billy Russo. Now, I guess they wanted the crime family to have, seeming like a certain nationality, obviously, instead of just making him Russo. But nonetheless, he does become Jigsaw, and he's noticed down in the lower right-hand corner, Billy the Beaut. So that's really cool. And then notice the question mark by Jimmy Russotti. We'll get to him in a second. But yeah, so the only problem I had was this guy was kind of cheesy. And he even played a little cheesy when he became Jigsaw. But boy, was he scary as Jigsaw. Yeesh. Yeah, that's the same guy. Oh, my word. And he only gets scarier throughout the movie. Oh, gosh. Yeah, it was good. I thought Jigsaw was good. I just wish the guy hadn't been kind of so annoying because you really wanted to punch him. Although you wouldn't want to punch that face. Yuck. Okay, so then I mentioned Jimmy, or James Russotti. He is a.k.a. Looney Bin Jim, they call him, because he's strapped away in the loony bin because he's a little crazy. And yeah, trust me, in this movie, he's absolutely crazy. And here they are together, because they're brothers, I should say, if you didn't already catch that. And boy, were they menacing as a team, especially in the end of the movie. The final fight with these two is intense. All right, so also in the movie is McGinty and his Free Flow Gang. They call them that because they do parkour throughout the whole movie. This guy's also from the comics. Very different in the comics, but they did at least keep his gold tooth. That's pretty cool. So yeah, he shows up as a villain, and the Punisher fights them. Takes him out pretty fast, but it's cool. And then two more people working with Jigsaw directly from the comics, Carmine Pizzi Gazzara, obviously looks very different than in the comics, and his son Ink. So both in the movie and in the comics, they're a father and son, and they all work for Jigsaw. And then we even have two more very smaller characters, but very important in the movie. Christu Boulay, I guess. I don't remember how to say his last name. It's Russian. He plays a Russian in the movie. In the comics, they're Romanian, but he and his father, Tibaru, I guess. He looks very different than in the comics. Well, that guy looks crazy in the comics. But yeah, they run afoul with Jigsaw and kind of get in a big war at the end, and it's awesome. Really, the final 20 minutes of this, just like Dolph Lundgren's movie, is incredible. Speaking of incredible, this is part of why it's so good. So the mother and the child get kidnapped, and so does Micro. And Punisher has to make a very hard choice of what to do in this situation. I'm not even going to give you any hints as to what happened. You can watch it. It is intense and really, really well done. All right, so then at the end of the movie, we have a touching moment with the widow and her child as she pulls Punisher aside. Remember, Punisher was responsible for her husband dying. It's been eating him up this whole movie, so it's very touching when she says, "My husband, Nicky, we talked about you. We argued about you. He said you were one of the good guys." Oh, because she was mad at him the whole movie, understandably, mad at him the whole movie. And for her to say that was really a big deal to him. And then the little daughter waves goodbye to him, and he waves goodbye to her. Feebly waves goodbye, but, because he's thinking of his own daughter. So, yeah, that was really cool. I mean, it was a movie with some heart. Really, really violent, but had some heart to it. And then this was kind of cool. So at the end, he's standing in front of this church, and it did say Jesus saves, but the Jesus goes out and just says saves, and then as the lights go out, you just see saves and the Punisher emblem. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So clearly justice, this side at least of paradise, sits in the hands of the Punisher. All right, so when does this thing happen in the timeline? Well, they answered that for us pretty clearly, October of 2008. And then when you throw in Dirty Laundry, which you've never seen that, it's really cool. Nice little short with Thomas Jane and Ron Perlman in it, and that's August of 2012. So again, none of these are tied to each other, well, other than Thomas Jane's two entries. They're not tied to each other, but I wanted you to see them all in the timeline here together. And also, I do have on my Google Drive all of the multiverse films. This image is out there. This is when they were all released, and I haven't covered a lot on this image. Obviously, I've covered Blade, and now I've covered Punisher. I am going to cover Nick Fury because I do think there's a chance that David Hasselhoff could show up in Secret Wars. That would be awesome. That'd be just like him. And then maybe Howard the Duck will show up. It's probably not going to be the same version because obviously there's already a Howard Duck in the movie or in the MCU. But still, it'd be awesome to see this version of Howard the Duck kind of show up in the background somewhere. However, this image, almost every one of these, I've now covered the timelines for. The only ones I haven't are Man-Thing, which I am going to cover. I've found it now. A couple of folks that watch the videos told me where to find it. And I have never covered Mutant X. I don't know if I will or not. I may. Let me know your thoughts. Do you want to know about that one or not? That just doesn't seem like it's worth the effort. I have had some people ask me, though, would I cover Hit Monkey? And then I have covered Moon Girl not from a timeline standpoint, but at least from a breakdown standpoint. But yeah, I may look at those as well. So yeah, it's amazing. Over time, I've covered everything else on here if you want to know their timelines. And I have the Google Sheet out there. Check that out. It is sorted by timeline order because I love timeline order, but you can also sort by release. You can go up to the sort column and switch it back and forth between release and timeline. And now I've added a new filter to this. So I already had a filter for the multiverse, which you can see here. You can see these are all those multiverse movies, but I've even made one for Deadpool and Wolverine. So now you know which movies are canon thanks to Deadpool and Wolverine. I will point out the last entry down there, Fantasforstic, however you want to say it. They didn't technically make that canon because we didn't see anybody from it, but I'm going to guess that it is a branch off of the Fantastic Four that we did see with Johnny Storm played by Chris Evans. So I also am really hoping in Secret Wars that we get a council of Reeds, and it has all of the Reed Richards from all the different movies. That would be awesome. But this Google Drive, this Google Sheet is on my Google Drive, and I'll leave a pinned comment so that you can find it. So, let me know your thoughts. Which of these Punishers do you think are canon to Deadpool and Wolverine? Or are they all three now canon? I think they are. And what might be that fifth one, in addition, of course, to Netflix's version played by John Bernthal? And don't forget the August contest. Be a subscriber, leave a comment, win a book or a steelbook. And there's that membership option in case you're interested. And then also, we do have a Discord where we talk all things timeline. And in particular, folks were asking which Punishers do they think are canon to the MCU? That very question that I addressed inside this video. So I'd love to have you join the Discord. We have 1,700 members across the globe. Conversations happening 24/7. So I will leave a pinned comment so you can join if you're interested. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, the ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.